Okay. Good morning and welcome, everybody. We hope more people will join us as we go on. This is a seminar organised by the Commonwealth Disabled Youth Forum, which is part of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, and I will explain the differences. And the topic is the paradigm shift about how we conceptualise disability and disabled people with disabilities, as some people prefer to say. And my name is Richard Rieser. I'm the General Secretary of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, elected by the General Assemblies, which we hold every 2 or 3 years. If you want to know more about us, the website is up there. And we are not an individual membership organisation. We are an organisation which is of member organisations, i.e. organisations that represent disabled people in the 56 countries of the Commonwealth. And we have recently expanded that to the overseas territories of the UK. So we're looking for them to join as well. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so what is the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum? Well, we set this up soon after a number of us had met in New York during making the UN CRPD, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And it was mainly due to the Kenyan delegate, Ugandan delegate, James Mwanda, who was a member of parliament from Uganda. And there were a number of us who met up in Kampala and decided we need to do this. And we bring together, as I said just now, national associations, which are representative, the umbrella organizations of disabled people's organizations, DPOs. And the fundamental purpose was to implement UNCRPD and develop full disability equality across what was then 54 countries and now 56 countries of the Commonwealth. And we were taking, from the beginning, a social model stroke human rights approach. We met the following year in London with both a full committee of about 19 countries, but we also, at the same time, and have always pushed for this, had a youth forum as well that met parallel, and they had 2 representatives on the final executive committee that was there. So this is a long tradition. We think youth is really important. I've had youth there all the way through. And we did a number of things, spoke at lots of forums around the world, raised the profile of disability rights, disabled people, did a really important regional seminar in the Pacific for the 9 Pacific Commonwealth countries there. And that had an impact which led to 5 of those countries ratifying the convention in the next year. That was in 2013. But after that, for various reasons, lack of funding, lack of recognition from the Commonwealth for us, and a general secretary in India, Javid Abidi, who didn't want this as a competition to what he was building then, his version of the Disabled People's International. And with his demise a few years later, in 2018, a number of people came together at the first Global Disability Summit in London and recognized me. I was, from the beginning, the treasurer and the UK rep of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum. And they said, Richard, let's meet and let's see how we can get this started. So we had 25 people came to that meeting. We committed to New York the following year when the Conference of State Parties takes place, who oversee the UN convention. And so we met in New York and we had 28 country representatives, plus a number of others from associate organizations, and 5 didn't make it. So we would have been 33 national organizations. We're now 47. That's the umbrella organizations, plus about another 55 associates. But the associates have to be covering at least half or most of their country for a specific impairment group or for women or for youth, and they can become associates. Individuals can't join, but we do have the CDPF Disability Human Rights Advocates Network, and people can join that so they stay in touch with what we're doing. Our key work at the moment is to get the Disability Inclusion Action Plan adopted in Samoa. We found from going to the heads of government meeting that we are not hitting the target with regard to disability across the Commonwealth. And so we've decided to bring forward this Disability Inclusion Action Plan. Can we go back a bit, one back? I haven't quite finished on that slide, please. Yeah, thanks. And so that's what we're doing. We would urge people to help us with that. We've also got the Women's Forum who've got a survey out at the moment. So any girls or women on this call, we would welcome your support in filling out that questionnaire. Those views will go to the Women's Forum in Chogam in Samoa in the week of the 20th of October. We've got the Youth Forum, which this is part of. We've got a climate emergency committee. We're also working on inclusive education, employment, and we continue to do training. And in this year of elections, we've been focusing on getting better representation of disabled people. We're also looking at intersectionality and various other events. So let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so Kihembo, who's kindly doing these slides for me, is our youth representative on our executive, elected in 2022. And Saista from India is also youth representative on the executive. And Emile, who you'll hear from, was, but is now past the cutoff date, and so is our representative for underrepresented groups on the executive. In the beginning of the year of youth, we produced our manifesto, and we ran Disabled Leadership, which many of you will have come through online, with 151 30 or under disabled leaders. And the material from that is all on our website. So if people have missed that and want to catch up, you can go to that and watch at your leisure that. And there's also, if you're not sure about disability in general, and I'm going to just touch on it, there's 14 modules up there on the training section from our 2021 course. So that will bring you up to speed. So after the training, Kihembo took the initiative and set up a WhatsApp group of those who've been on the training. That's expanded. And so at our executive meeting in face-to-face in Nairobi in Kenya, we put the following forward. We want a membership of that youth forum. And in order to join it, you need to understand and agree with a social human rights model of disability, be people with long-term impairing conditions who view themselves as disabled, be 30 years or under, agree to work in your local or national disabled people's organizations. The query has come up, is being part of the Commonwealth Disabled Youth Forum enough? No, it isn't. You've got to go and join a local DPO or your national one. And how are these defined? They need to have a majority of their management board run and controlled by disabled people. So these are not parents' organizations or organizations which are doing things for us. They are organizations of us. And that's quite a crucial distinction, which I'll talk about in a minute. You need to be a citizen of the Commonwealth, and decisions need to be made in a measured and democratic way. So next slide, please. So that's the relationship between the two parts of our organization, the General Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum and the Youth Forum. Impairment is, right, so now on to thinking about disability. Impairment is due to physical, mental, psychosocial loss of function. Impairment is part of the human condition. As long as there have been human beings, there have been impairments. It's just part of what happens to us, caused by disease, genetics, war, accident, or lack of food or water, or a combination of any of those. So that's impairment. It is a general part of human life. And however good our medicine gets, there will still be new impairments. People may live longer and in fact have considerably lived longer in the world, but there are still impairments that cause our death in many cases. So, for instance, cancer in the UK is counted as a disability. It probably isn't in most of Africa, but it is because it impacts seriously on people's lives. Many other hidden impairments are counted as well, but not so much in places like Asia, where they have to be specific impairments. We're not in favour of governments measuring disability like that. We would prefer them to move to using the Washington questions, but that's for another seminar. For thousands of years, us as people with impairments have been seen through the lens of difference and labels and meanings given to us. So this has nothing to do with our impairments. It's everything to do with interpretations of it through the culture, often relying on traditional ideas of all-powerful deities or spirits. And then when people have been treated badly as a result of being seen like that, some people have said, oh, this is not right, that people are forced into begging or live on the streets or outcast. So we'll set up charities and look after them. And all three of the main religions in the world, Judaism, Islam and Christianity, all have this idea of charity. And if you don't practice charity, then you're unlikely to attain a state of heavenly grace after you pass on, according to those religions. And then we've had doctors coming in and specialists who have looked at us and said, oh, well, we know what to do. We'll try and fix you. Trouble is, they don't know how to fix us in many of the conditions we continue to have. Some of them are preventable, and we're all in favor of that prevention going on. But we are not wanting to be seen through that lens, the lens of our impairment. But often life and social interactions did not fit the models with disabled people being part of the community work or education. We were ostracized, left outside. So we ourselves developed a different way of looking at this starting about 70 years ago, where we said, it's not us that's the problem, it's you, society, with your negative attitudes and barriers that you create for us as a result. And as a result of campaigning by disabled people, the human rights approach and the social model came into being. Next. So just a couple of examples. Witches, witch hunts, witch doctors. These have been around for a long time. In medieval Europe, there was something called the Malleus Maleficarum, which was a Catholic document about how you could identify witches in your community. This got into folklore. You're probably all familiar with the story of the witch in Hansel and Gretel, and she's always portrayed as disabled, bent over, using a crutch, and visually impaired. But more recently, across much of Africa, many other smaller cultural islands and South Asia, traditional beliefs hold that disabled people may be closer to the spirit world, that they may be impacted by the spirit world or all-powerful beings, that this may be punishment as a result of something the parents have done wrong. All of this is there and is still very live. Or in the case of albinism across much of Africa, there are seen to be ghost people, and that their body parts can bestow health and good fortune on other people. Only problem is that leads to even more barbaric treatment of that group of disabled people. So this is still very much a live thing, the traditional view. Next. Next slide. All right. Another way that we can look at this is the body beautiful. The Greeks, who, if you like, were one of the foundations of Western European civilization, which unfortunately for you, or we took to you through our imperial and colonial efforts. And so much of what you learn in your schools comes from this body of knowledge. In ancient Greek, God and good have a similar root, and therefore you are nearer to God if you have a perfect, good body. And the more you're away from that, the more evil you are likely to be. Of course, this is naive and stupid, but just look at any Batman film or any cartoon-based film, and you'll see this polarity between good and evil. Good looks good, evil looks bad. Of course, it's not the case. Some of the most evil people are people who've done most harm to humanity in the world look just like everybody else. So it's not true. But we still have this focus on beautifulness being perfection. And of course, nobody is perfect. So the photos are airbrushed and all sorts of things so that people look perfect. And only recently have we actually had, for instance, in the sexist trade of fashion and models, have we got disabled models on the catwalk. I'm not sure whether that's a good or a bad thing. On the sense of inclusion, it's a good thing, but in promoting sexist stereotypes, it's probably not. So next slide, please. And then we have this idea of charity, which started very much with those religions that I talked about, but then particularly in Europe and America in the 19th century, organizations were set up that looked around and said, oh, these poor disabled people, we have to do more for them. And so there's a picture of a little girl with polio and a caliper and money being put into that. That's one close to my heart, as my condition was polio. And every time I passed one of those, it made me feel sick, actually, as I was growing up in the 50s and 60s in Britain. And then this girl on the top picture lives under the shadow of diabetes. She probably didn't know she lived under a shadow till the Diabetes Association put this up on hoardings all over Britain. She probably was well adjusted to just checking her blood sugar levels and injecting insulin and watching her diet. But suddenly it's given this the shadow. So it's given this otherness. And so the Multiple Sclerosis Society there make it a tragedy. Well, maybe it is, but for a lot of people, that impairment, they live with it for up to 40 years. So, yes, they have to adjust, but, and then people raise money for us. And in the British disability movement, there's a demo of Block Telethon, it was called, where we were fed up with the sort of pornification of our bodies and our minds to raise money, which did nothing for us because we didn't control it. And 2,000 disabled people blocked that. And ITV television never put it on again after that. So it can be effective. How do we deal with charities? Next slide. So there are many charities working across our countries, organizations like Sight Savers, CBM, A Light for the World, Save the Children, and so on. They take on, and many of our organizations also have to have charitable status, but if they are there for charitable purposes, we have to ask questions of them when they move into our area of work and say, do they accept the leadership and thinking of us as disabled people's organizations? If they don't, then they're just using us and we're not happy for that. Do they do everything they can to empower and build the capacity of DPOs? Some do, some don't. So Handicap International, as it used to be known, does a lot of capacity building and has actually shifted the dial there quite significantly. Do they reject the charity and medical model in favor of the social human rights model? Some do, some don't. Do they put their organizational, financial and training resources at the disposal of disabled peoples and their organizations? A few do, most don't. If the charity provides welfare services and treatment, do they still empower disabled people with their work? Well, they often split that. So Sight Savers have lots of clinics, which is just about eye health, and they don't really talk to those people who they meet, who are disabled people, about their rights and inclusion. That's a separate section, and that doesn't work. It's got to be integrated. It's got to be part of it. And it's got to be with discussion with the DPOs that are operating in that area. Do they allow disabled people and their organizations to lead in any campaign and so on? Our experience of the recent program of run by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Disability Inclusive Development, £48 million, all of it went to non-disabled organizations, these charities. There was some consultation at the beginning and end. Some of you may have taken part of it, but that's not co-production. That is stealing our clothes, and we have to be very careful about that. Thank you. Next slide. How do we come to this view? Well, we first of all had to look at what the problem was. And so we characterize this as the medical model, which looks at us through a lens, puts us and says, what can't we do? and then much of the money, if there is any money for welfare that's given out, is linked to assessments of that. But as it's run by doctors and their medical practitioners who've come through that route, then it's treat and cure, make us as normal as possible. If they can't, then put us away somewhere else, leave us isolated in our home, not happy to accept us as disabled people as leaders. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so if we look at impairment as the problem in the medical model, that's what we can't do, what is our condition, then a very large number of people, more in developed countries and less in developing countries, but still quite a substantial number of people are employed with this model in mind to say, well, how can we make these people's lives better? How can we alter them to make their life better? And then we get things like special transport, special schools, special workshops for us to be in if we're lucky. People trying to make us do things as if we didn't have our impairment, like occupational therapists, speech therapists, educational psychologists, and training centres. All of this using up a huge amount of resource that maybe will be better run through disabled people's organisations, because we are the experts on our impairments. We know what helps us to work, to live, to have a family life, and so on. And this doesn't really help us. Some of these rehabilitation professionals have recently moved over to listening to us and taking an inclusive social model approach, but most still don't around the world. Next slide. So, struggles by disabled people and their allies for disability rights, particularly parents as allies who fought for inclusive education all over the world. And wherever we've had inclusive education introduced, there's usually been a strong parental fight for that, saying we want our children to have the same opportunities as everybody else. So this has been really the motivation, and right from the late 60s onwards, disabled people and their allies were rising up and saying, no, we don't accept the way you characterize us. And this came to a head really in 1980, when the UN called the International Year of the Disabled. And next slide, please. And I'll tell you a little story about that in a minute. Next slide. Yeah, so the alternative which disabled people themselves put forward, and this wasn't just people, UPIAS was a group in the UK, Union of Physically Impaired Against Segregation, but it was also people in Sweden, in Malaysia, in Zimbabwe, Southern Africa, South America, Canada, who came to this view that really the problem is not us, it's the structures in society. And these have been created through people's attitude. Barriers are there because people who designed the environment didn't think there was a need for access. If you had universal design as the convention asked for, of course it would have been there from the beginning. And it isn't that much more expensive. Of course, to alter the fabric of society, the built fabric and the transport fabric, the information fabric afterwards is much more expensive. But what we're calling for here is it's the lack of useful education, it's discrimination in employment, it's segregated services, it's which lead to poverty, it's belief in the medical model, inaccessible information and transport, prejudice, and our devaluation and overall inaccessible environments. That's what causes disability. We are disabled because of this. We have impairments, but whether we're disabled depends on these barriers. And that's why we call ourselves disabled people, because we are united in getting rid of this disabling environment. We are not people with disabilities. People first, it might be polite and nice, some people think, but think about it for a minute. If this is our problem, we are not the people with this. It's society with this, and therefore we have to come together as disabled people to break down these barriers, whatever our particular impairment is. And that's why we favour cross-impairment organisation as the best way forward. So we have to learn to work with each other's communication needs and access needs before we challenge society to also work with them and knock down these barriers. Next. Yeah. So it's the barriers that disable. Obviously now you can understand this wall, which is a good analogy for it. We've got a little film which we use sometimes, break down this wall, courtesy of Comic Relief. Negative attitudes, folklore, customs and beliefs, inaccessible buildings and transport, inaccessible information, lack of income and support, ignorance and lack of empathy, denial of human rights, violence, rape and bullying, particularly for disabled women, who it's at a level of 3 times the normal gender-based violence for disabled women and girls. So, and the lack of education. These are our problems, and we need to challenge them and have campaigns to both activism and get in round the seats of power and advocate for these changes, because we do know the solutions. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the paradigm shift, which was developed by disabled people, came into the UN CRPD. It wasn't made up by the UN, as they say here. The convention follows decades of work by the United Nations to change attitudes and approaches to persons with disabilities. That's not actually true. Decades of work by disabled people to make the UN do that, yes. It takes to a new height the movement away from viewing the person with disabilities as objects of charity, medical treatment and social protection, towards viewing persons with disabilities as subjects with rights who are capable of claiming those rights and making their own decisions. Interesting how this persons with disabilities creeps in here. The convention, when it was made, talked about representative organisations of disabled people. There was a strong lobby for person first language, particularly led by parents in the United States, who felt that there was calling people disabled people was pejorative, because they didn't understand that we were a social rights movement. Sure, if you want to be a person with disabilities, you can be an isolated person with the wrong label put to you, but it won't build a movement which unites us and give people the power of understanding that they are part of a social oppression. And that's why we stick with our language. Next label, next slide. So, as I said, UPI started this. It was in 1981 that Disabled People's International first recognized the difference. Impairment is the loss or limitation of physical, mental, or sensory function. You could add psychosocial to that. On a long-term or permanent basis. Disablement, handicap at the time as it was called, is the loss or limitation of opportunity to take part in the normal life of the community on an equal level with others due to physical and social barriers. So as disabled people, we are subject to a process of disablement through society's barriers. And the UNCRPD took this on board from when it was adopted in 81, when DPI was set up in Singapore. 25 years later, in 2006, we have this at the heart of the UNCRPD, confusing people because it doesn't generally make the difference clear. This definition allowed the burgeoning disability movement to use a social model to analyse the oppression people with disabilities face, to campaign for a fundamental change in attitudes and practices. And that's why I said it wasn't the UN, it was disabled people's movement who had to identify over 1.5 million examples of discrimination that resulted from societal attitudes towards disabled people, that finally convinced the UN General Assembly in 2000 to set up the UN ad hoc committee that framed the convention. That was unique in the way that all human rights treaties have been framed. It wasn't just diplomats who framed it. They didn't know what to say. It was disabled people's representatives who came together for 5 years to draft that convention. So it's our convention. And when we say nothing about us without us, that's what we mean. Thanks. Next. So this is a little bit of history. I won't go on it for long, but in 1980, that year of disabled people, there was a rehabilitation international conference, and they asked for half the board to be disabled people, which is fair enough. That was rejected because it was mainly medical model, medical professionals. So 400 delegates walked out and set up the beginnings of DPI, which met the following year and adopted that definition we've just looked at, and then continued to push. This wasn't just, as I said before, as you can see, some of the leaders from Canada there, but also people like Joshua Malinga from Zimbabwe, who became the secretary of it for a long time. Okay, next slide. So it was self-activity of us as disabled people that brought this shift about. And it's become really atomized since then. So Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum is about rebuilding that solidarity between us and our self-activity through this understanding of the paradigm shift, recognizing, and this is in the convention, recognizing that disability is an evolving concept and that disability results from the interaction of persons with impairments and attitudinal and environmental barriers that hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. That is the social model of disability, and it then opens up human rights for us across that convention. And those have been adopted by the European Disability Strategy, the African Disability Protocol, and a number of other places. You can find out much more about it, the convention on that UN website. Our action plan, which is there, and also you can still get, if you're from the Youth Forum, if you can get a sponsor. We haven't money now, but it's still open for registration to get yourself to Samoa. You have to get the cost of the fare, which is substantial because it's a long way from most places. But the actual accommodation is about $150 a night, and you'd be looking to four or five nights. It's on an ocean liner, and the meals are included in that. So if you can get the sponsorship, you should put in to actually do it. It will be on the PowerPoint that will be sent to everybody. Next slide, please. So winding up, really, we have had this fantastic shift from the medical model, which saw the focus on us, curing us, fixing us, or separating us, to a social human rights model, which is in the convention and challenges discrimination against us, champions our participation and involvement to change attitudes, organization, and environment. And so far, of the countries of the world, 191 have ratified. In the Commonwealth, 55 out of 56, only Tonga not yet ratified. Ratified means brought into law in your country. You can do nothing that goes away from that. And from the moment that that comes in, there is a duty to make reasonable adjustment, not when money is available. There is an immediate duty in a whole number of ways. There is, of course, for the social and economic articles, progressive realization, which means as you have the money, you can do it. But that is not on the principles, and it is not on the key state objectives. In other words, Article 3, 4, and 5, 6 and 7, which is women and youth, 8, which is awareness raising, and 9, which is accessibility, is not limited on those. And therefore, you need to press ahead with campaigns on that in your countries, wherever you are locally, in your college, in your school, wherever, in your neighborhood, right up to the district, region, state. And there should be laws passed which fully incorporate the rights into your country. And then it's a question of making sure that the legal system, the judicial system, is open and accessible to disabled people so we can have those rights, and people who continue to discriminate us will actually feel the full force of the law. So this is why this paradigm shift is so important, and we must keep taking it forward generation after generation till we've actually achieved full equality for disabled people, all people with long-term impairments around the world. Thank you. So if we can cut that presentation now, we will go on now, I think, to some other of the presentations that we've got. We have a presentation, I think, from Emile Gouws, who is the representative on our executive for underrepresented groups. Emile himself is a self-advocate person with neurodiversity, autism, and he wants to talk to you about how he sees the paradigm shift. So can we move to Emile's contribution, please, Kihembo? I should say, while he's doing that we will take questions after these presentations, but we will have a little break after Kihembo's film to give our signers and our captioners a rest. But we'll go on for a bit longer. And so the next thing is Emile's film, if we can get it up. Okay, as we have communication back, we're still having difficulty getting connected back to Kihembo in Uganda because of a power outage there. We have some of the films our end, so we're going to try and show Dr. Emile Gouws's film first. Then we have a PowerPoint with audio from Dr. Sruti Mohapatra from India. Then I'll come to Gorret from Uganda, if she's managing to still be on, to give her comments. And hopefully by then we will have power re-established, and we will go back to Kihembo for his presentation, which unfortunately we don't have a copy of this end, which is obviously a lesson for us to make sure we have all these things lined up, because this sort of power outage can happen at any time. So we're waiting now for Gemma to see if she can load up Emile's film, and then we will watch that. Yeah, I think we might be there now. Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead with Emile, please.
Good day. My name is Dr. Emile Gouws. It is truly an honor to represent underrepresented groups on the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum. This is not just a position for me, it is a responsibility. I'm calling to ensure that the voices of those who have been historically overlooked are not just heard, but amplified. Inclusion is often spoken as a global goal, but for many it remains a distant reality. For underrepresented communities, whether by virtue of geography, socioeconomic status, gender, or intersectional identities, the barriers to inclusion are multifaceted and deeply entrenched. As a member of this forum, I saw it as my role to break down these barriers and create pathways for genuine empowerment. Why does representation matter? We often hear the phrase, nothing about us without us, right? But this mantra embodies the very essence of meaningful representation. It's a reminder that decisions affecting any group should include that group in the decision-making process. As a representative of underrepresented groups, I'm here to ensure that those who might otherwise be left out are actively included in shaping the policies and initiatives that affect their lives. Our forum plays a pivotal role in advocating for the right of disabled people across the Commonwealth, but it's crucial that we recognize the diversity within our disabled communities. Disability intersects with race, gender, socioeconomic background, and other aspects of identity in ways that can compound discrimination and exclusion. It is not enough to simply advocate for disabled people. We must ensure that the most marginalized among us are given a seat at the table. How can we bring diverse voices forward? One of the primary goals as a representative and as a formerly youth member was to ensure that we elevate the stories, experiences, and the needs of those who were often sidelined. Many in our communities, especially those in rural areas from indigenous populations or those who face multiple forms of marginalization, are not always able to access the platforms where their concerns can be heard. Our role is to conduct with those voices. This involves active listening, outreach, and engagement. It is essential that we do not assume that others need, but rather that we create spaces for them to express their needs and priorities directly. We are committed to making sure that those voices are not only heard, but are central in shaping our work. Representation is how we can advocate for structural change. However, this is only the first step. The next is turning the representation into action. Through this forum, we advocate for policy changes that dismantle systematic inequalities and create opportunities for underrepresented groups to thrive. This means addressing inequalities in education, healthcare, and employment. It means pushing for accessible environments, not just physically, but socially and culturally, where everyone feels that they belong. A key area that we must focus on is the implementation of the UNCRPD. While many countries have ratified this convention, the lived reality for disabled people, particularly those from marginalized communities, often falls short of what the convention promises. We are committed in working with the forum to hold governments accountable and ensuring that the rights enshrined in the convention become a lived reality for all. How can we empower the next generation? Finally, our reputation is all about legacy. We believe that we have a responsibility not only to advocate for the current generations, but to pave the way for future ones. This means working to create systems where underrepresented groups no longer need to fight for recognition, but where the inclusion is automatic and intrinsic. For too long, underrepresented groups have been forced to fight for spaces that should have been theirs from the start. As we move forward, it is our hope that the work that we do today will create a future where young, disabled people from all walks of life can see themselves reflected in the institutions and policies that shape their lives, where they no longer have to question whether they belong because they know they do. To end off, I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to speak to you today, but also more importantly, to be on the CDPF. It is a responsibility that I do not take lightly. As we continue working together, we are committed. We are committed to ensuring that the voices of underrepresented groups remain at the forefront and that the work that we do continues towards a future where inclusion is not just aspiration, but reality for all. Thank you.
After Kihembo, Gorret, I'm going to come to you for your comments. Then we will show Sruti's PowerPoint. Okay, Kihembo.
Thank you, Richard, for that insightful session. Welcome, everyone, to this groundbreaking webinar hosted by Commonwealth Disabled Youth Forum. My name is Kihembo Wilbert from Uganda, and I have the honor of being elected youth representative for the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum and the coordinator for this youth forum. I am also a soft engineer by profession. Today, I want to take you through a vital conversation on disability, which revolves around how society views us, often focusing on our impairments rather than our names, skills, or capabilities. Growing up, I expressed firsthand how society often associates disabled individuals with their empowerments rather than their names, skills, or contributions. In the schools I attended, I wasn't known as Kihembo, the student, but rather as the lame boy. My peers and teachers defined me by my physical condition, not by my capabilities. The story is not unique to me. It reflects the reality for many disabled people who face prejudice and stereotypes every day. But this is precisely why we are here today, to change that narrative. At the heart of this movement is a crucial idea, the paradigm shift from the medical model of disability to the social and human rights models. For far too long, the medical model has framed a disability as something that needs to be fixed or cured. It centers the problem on the person's body, viewing us through the lens of our impairments. This creates a society where disabled people are seen as incapable or inferior, which leads to exclusion. However, the social model flips this thinking. It recognizes that it's not our bodies that disable us, it's the barriers in society. Whether these are physical barriers like inaccessible buildings or attitudinal barriers like discrimination, they are real obstacles we must overcome. But the shift doesn't end there. The human rights model goes even further. It emphasizes our inherent dignity and rights, putting disabled people at the center of decision-making. The human rights model goes even further. It emphasizes our inherent dignity and rights, putting disabled people at the center of decision-making about our own lives. This is about empowering us to be active members of society, not passive recipients of charity or pity. Empowerment is key to this shift. Disabled youth like us must take charge of this change. It begins with challenging the outdated perceptions that hold us back. We are defined by our abilities, our potential, and our contributions to society. I present before you today as a proof of that. Despite the stigma I faced in school, I became a software engineer, and I now represent disabled youth at the Commonwealth level. Our stories, our successes are the strongest tools we have to challenge these misconceptions. And so I invite all of you, disabled youth across the Commonwealth, to join the Commonwealth Disabled Youth Forum. Let us continue this movement. Together, we can break down barriers and society sees. We are more than our disabilities. We are leaders, innovators, and change makers. The time for
some problems towards the end there, but I think the message was very strong from Kihembo. Gorret, are you online? I think you are. Like to take your contribution next, and then we'll wind up with contribution from Dr. Sruti Mohapatra.
Yes, I am.
Okay, do you want to put on
Yes,
your screen and then we can see
yes,
you?
I am online.
Okay. Would you like to put on your video so we can see you?
Yes, my name is Namwanje Gorret, Program Coordinator, Commonwealth Youth Forum, an organization for youth with disabilities, which supports youth with disabilities. I'm a female representative for youth with disabilities in Ginger. I'm a mental health and psychosocial advocate, disability advocate, and climate change activist. I represent youth with disabilities at the Uganda Parliamentary Forum, and I represent youth with disability and early marriage in girls. Yeah, thank you very much, Kemba, for sharing my screen. I'm just using some of the pictures which I took while doing some activities. As we youth with disabilities, we have to support and encourage other youth with disabilities, because the experience that we went through or the community challenges as we youth with disabilities, other youth who are still young are going to experience the same. So my support that I give, I support youth with disabilities to take them to vocational rehabilitation centers like Rieser, Kireka, and Impumude vocational rehabilitation centers, such that they learn different skills like tailoring, hairdressing, leatherwork, and tailoring, and leatherwork. I also support girls in schools, girls with disabilities, while distributing sanitary towels to them, monthly sanitary towels to help them in schools. We experience a lot with girls with disabilities. So sometimes there is some news which I heard here in Busoga, a girl who was using sand during her menstrual period. She just got sand and put in a polythene bag. That's what she was being using. So for me, I started supporting those girls with distributing sanitary towels. Advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities. I started advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities when I was still doing my studies. I completed my secondary with 7 certificates for leadership. I'm a youth who likes leadership. Though I was having a disability, but it didn't stop me from working and encouraging other youth to be an example such that they also have a bright future. I was the guild president in the Uganda National Students Association when I was in secondary, secretary of finance in the UNSA body, Uganda National Students Association. I got very many certificates for leadership, guard commander in patriotism. When I joined my vocational institute, I was also a guild president on Mpumude Vocational Rehabilitation Center, where I was doing my first 2 courses from an institution for youth or persons with disabilities. I was their guild president. I finished my studies, but my parents were unable to continue paying for my school fees. It didn't stop me from encouraging other youth and continue with my studies. I got connected or in touch with other organizations which encouraged me to finish my studies, and I have passion in fashion and design and computer. So we have to advocate for our rights through radio talk shows, encouraging other youth with disabilities to engage in community activities, like maybe when there is a gathering, they're teaching them about climate change, how to keep the environment clean. We youth with disabilities, we have to engage in them because we don't have to be left behind in any opportunity which comes. We have to be included such that we create an inclusive environment for ourselves and by ourselves. We have to be open, share our voices, and encourage others also to be an example. Nothing about us without us. Disability isn't inability. That's one of my picture I took previously. When one can look, might not be able to discover that I'm having a disability, but I'm having psychosocial disability. I believe in myself, and that's what I want other youth to do. You have to be leaders. You believe in yourself. Don't be shy. Don't fear yourself. You have to be open such that the community can hear you, listen to you, and know what are your special needs as a youth with disability. Thank you very much for sharing. Sorry for listening, and thank you very much, Kihembo, for your support.
Thank you very much, Namwanje. That very useful points that you made there, and stay online because I'm sure some people will have some questions for you in a minute. I think the last presentation we can fit in today so that we can have questions is from Dr. Sruti Mohapatra. I don't know if you can load that. It's a PowerPoint with a soundtrack that she's sent you. Gemma, can you get hold of that and load it up, please?
Well, I've got it here, but you'll have to tell me if
it's coming up.
I don't know how it works with the sound, I'm afraid.
I think yeah.
So I just don't know because I haven't been able to try playing it.
Okay, well, let's try it, and otherwise we'll send it to people.
So all I can do is try sharing and see what happens.
Okay. So
Pardon?
this may not work, and apologies for the technical problems. We've been hit by several, so we'll see if this works. Otherwise, we'll go to questions. So please, people, think of your questions to answer, please, and we'll field them, Namwanje and myself, and Kihembo can answer in the chat as well. Thank you. So Dr. Sruti runs a centre in Rieser, northeast India. Very successful Swabiman. She was an academic who had spinal injury in a crash some 25 years ago and has since been awarded for much of the work she's done, and she's one of our vice chairs. She made the point, first of all, the three major shifts she wants to get across in her presentation: discrimination, accessibility, and participation. And here she's showing a visual which shows hurdlers. The first is, these are little sort of people, models of people. The first is leaping the hurdle. The second is running up to the hurdle and about to leap it. And then the middle is someone, a red figure in a wheelchair, whose hands are open with despair because, of course, they're not going to be able to get over the hurdle. And what she talks about is discrimination is challenging discrimination is at the heart of the convention. It's in the preamble. It's in the principles, challenging discrimination, and it appears throughout all the articles. And therefore, it is not, from what she's saying, it is not possible to just accept that discrimination continues. Governments, by accepting this convention, and as I said, 55 of 56 of our Commonwealth countries have done so, have to actually do things to challenge discriminatory practices. They actually have to bring in laws that challenge discriminatory practices in employment, in transport, in provision of services, in health, in education. So often we hear head teachers saying, oh, they can't come to this school. That head teacher who says that needs to be taken to court to be challenged, because that is against the convention. And therefore, that employer who says, oh, no, we can't employ you, without even considering the reasonable accommodations that could be made, needs to be taken to law. So we have to have these laws to challenge discrimination, and this is really important, what she's saying. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So she's got a picture here of a series of cutout people, and in the middle, blue, in a circle, and in the middle it says stop discrimination, but on the outside is an image of the wheelchair and someone in red who is a person perhaps with hidden impairments, of which so many are not taken account of. And we, in the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, include all people with hidden impairments, whether that's mental health issues, psychosocial, learning difficulties, metabolic, such as diabetes, epilepsy, and so on. We are fighting for all of those people. And it's important that in your work, wherever you are, that you just don't go with those who have the obvious visible impairments, such as ambulatory impairments, either using a crutch, a stick, or a wheelchair, a walking device, or obviously using alternative ways to get around, such as many visually impaired and blind people, or indeed deaf people who are often obvious by their alternative forms of communication, though often can become hidden if they choose to do so. But we are standing for all, and challenging that discrimination is vital. And really, it's the bread and butter of building our movement wherever you are. As I said in my presentation, Dr. Sruti also said, we need to challenge this. And that sometimes means doing the research and digging beneath the surface of the newspaper, local newspaper or radio broadcast headline, finding out what has happened to that person, taking up their case and fighting for them with local organizations. there is people say, oh, well, we don't know how to get started. Well, you start by looking at signs of discrimination out there in your community, and you then find solidarity with that person and their families and start a local campaign. It could be letter writing, it could be asking questions in the local council, in the local papers, it could be raising the issue where there is disability discrimination and that person is on the receiving end of it. So this is absolutely vital work that Dr. Sruti is saying we must do. Next slide. For accessibility, this is Article 9 of the Convention, and what's important and what she pointed out yesterday when she spoke to us is it's not just about the obvious forms of access. And these are the signs, so sign language for disabled people, real-time captioning, closed captioning, assisted learning devices, and there are little icons on the screen for each of them, amplified phones, employment access, mobility access, information help, braille, large print, but most important also transport and the whole information system that we have. Interestingly enough, the big computer companies are often putting access panels into their laptops and their software, and it's important that that's there so that now, you know, we can use text to type or type to text. We don't need expensive speech devices, but even those are quite expensive for many people around the world, and the 80% of the cost is the software. So we need to be campaigning at national and regional levels for alternatives, for instead of having Microsoft Word, we can have alternative software. So an example of that is JAWS, which is a screen reader, which costs around $1,200. An alternative was developed by two blind young people who are computer literate in Australia, which costs about $50 and will do the same thing. And really, we would want to see governments being pushed to provide that sort of software for all blind students and adults, so that they can be part of the world of information technology. So these are real issues that have to be challenged at every level, and is again another place for campaigning and advocacy everywhere, is what Dr. Sruti was saying. Next, please. And she made the important point on the screen, for those who can't see it, there's an equality which shows 4 people in purple, a young woman in a wheelchair next to a bicycle, a very tall person on a bicycle that doesn't fit him, a woman who seems to be absolutely fitted to the bicycle, and a very small person who is not able to get on the seat of their bicycle and is standing on the pedals. In other words, equality, treating everybody the same, giving everybody the same thing, is not what we're aiming at. What we're aiming at is equity. And on the bottom diagram, we see, first of all, the young woman who was in a wheelchair is now in a tricycle, which is hand pedaled, and she can then get along in the same way as everybody else. The very tall person is now on a bicycle that is suitable for him, so his pedals are reached by his legs without being all scrunched up. The woman who had the right bicycle has it and is still there, but the smaller person has now got a bicycle that is suitable for them. So equity is not treating everybody the same. That's equality. Equity is giving everybody what they need to thrive. And that means looking at their differences. And that means, for instance, in education, not treating everybody the same, which we call integration, but inclusion, which means finding out what each person needs in order to access learning and providing it. And that is a big barrier in many societies that have standard curriculum and standard tests Those are equality, they are not equity, and they have to be changed. Next slide, please. So there's a thank you there, but the key to all of this was her last point, is participation. We need everybody who is disabled, i.e. those with long-term impairments, whether they're hidden or not, to not be shy, as Gorret said, but to claim their space in society and be supported by us as other disabled people, as their allies, but also build outwards so that those in the community who do not have an impairment get rid of their old-fashioned and, to be honest, rather stupid ideas about difference, and to join in seeing that we have human rights and therefore we need to participate, we need full access, and we need to challenge together discrimination. Thank you. That was a summary of what Dr. Sruti said yesterday. I'm going to now open this up for questions that we have generated. Kihembo said we need time for questions when we looked at yesterday. So please do come up with questions and I will call you to speak. So I'm going to look into the participation list. Please signify by using the button at the bottom, which is called the react button, that you have something to say by raising your hand or putting a thumbs up sign next to your, if you press that, it will come up in the participation bar next to your name and I can call you to speak. So the floor is open. Please let us have any questions, or if you have comments to make, please just make those comments. There were a number of you I recognize from your names who have been on the course. There are officers here from the Commonwealth Disabled Youth Forum, the Secretary, Sishiro Raolu. There are a number of other people, and we would like to hear from you, please, at this point. What do we need to do to make the paradigm shift real where you live, where you function? Don't be shy, please. We are
Richard, somebody's put a comment in the chat, and they say, I have a recommendation on what Richard has spoken about the law and accessibility. Now, they may need sign language assistance.
Okay. Can you speak it as well, Esther?
She will sign and I'll voice what she will be saying.
Okay, fine.
Okay, I hope everyone can see me clearly. So good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. My name is Shayla, and I work with an organization by the name Free a Girls World Network. And I'm also a representative of, and I'm represent. Oh, I'm also representing the leader of. And I'm also representing the leader of Free Girls World Network. So I want to make a few recommendations about the laws and of inclusion, about accessibility. It's true that we have so many people who are really advocating for people with disability. But when you talk about accessibility to the law of when we are trying to make sure the laws of people with disability are accessible, it's sometimes it won't be enough if we just advocate, but it's a matter of time that we people with disability who are learning more about the law and even are joining those spaces and are sitting on those tables to make sure we see the action happening. In my opinion, I will say we need to actually even start creating awareness from the countryside of people who are not even aware about their rights. They don't know about the constitution. They don't know about the rules. They can't even defend themselves. It's about time we start talking about this from the grassroots level and start talking about all the challenges which we are facing from the society. So in my opinion, I think when we're talking of education, we have to make sure we educate people about the law of accessibility and not only do advocacy. We have to go to the grassroots level to make sure people are aware so that if any problem or anything is coming up, they know how to defend themselves. But if we continue to have good leaders and we continue to lead and teach people from our society, then everything is going to be well. I think sometimes the disabled people can have some challenges of understanding. They get to some organizations who don't even help them in advocating for themselves. But for now, I think if we actually teach our society or our members about the laws, then we're going to be able to advocate for ourselves and not allow other people to put us down.
Can I ask which country you're working in, please, Shayla?
I'm from Kenya.
Kenya. Thank you very much. Okay. We have several members on our executive from Kenya. I think it would be good if we put you in touch with them so that you can actually spend more time telling them, because they're the ones who go and talk to the government quite a lot. So your views, and maybe they can work with you to get down to the grassroots. Thank you. I had someone else who said they wanted to speak. Do you have anything else to say, or are you finished?
Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you.
That's all I had to say. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I had someone else's hand up. I saw, yeah, there's two hands up. Padulo Shihama, could you make your point, please? Put your microphone on.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity, Richard. My name is Pandulo Shehama from Namibia. I have gotten my injury, physical disability. I broke my spinal cord in car accident in 2018. I have recently taken up the opportunity or the advocates to advocate for people with disability, and I attended a regional consultation with the Namibian Training Authority in consultation for the development of pathways of articulations for the vocational training in Namibia. And part of...
We've lost your sound.
Sorry, am I still muted?
No, you're back on now.
Okay, sorry.
If you'd got to the point about attending pathways, so if you go on from there.
Oh, okay. Development of pathways and articulations for the vocational training in Namibia, and part of their vision is for them to develop a curriculum or a program that is inclusive and does not discriminate against disability. I have been given the opportunity to give feedback and to provide a model on how they can go about this to fulfill their vision. So I was just perhaps asking, since I'm still new to this and I'm just starting in my journey, I was just asking perhaps if there's anybody that is able to provide me with models that I can have a study and then provide feedback on, and then I can perhaps share the vision of this and how it can align with this development to have an inclusive free program, because this is the Vocational Training Authority, and I really believe that all disabled people should be part and parcel of this national development.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And yes, we do have people in Africa. I would think perhaps our treasurer, who's also a commissioner, a human rights commissioner, a spinally injured person herself in Malawi, might well be the person that I can put you in touch with. If you send me a message to me as the secretary, my email, I will put in the chat just now. And if you want to contact me and if you have a draft document from them or anything from the training, the rehabilitation group, we can comment on that. And I'm happy if you work with us, and we will look at what you're putting in before you send it into them. But we're certainly happy to do that. It's exactly the sort of work we can do. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard. I have your email, and I will send.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
because the submission date is on the 30th of September, so I think we still have some time to work.
Yeah, but if you send it this week, I'll get it in touch with a couple of people in Africa, and I'll have a look at it and make some comments myself as well. Okay, but thank you. I'll take Christy Joseph next, and then I'll come to Ambassador Nyasha because he spoke yesterday, and so give new people a chance to speak. Christy Joseph, please.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm from the Caribbean, so it is about minutes to 5 a.m. So I said good morning. I beg your pardon?
Where are you? Which country?
St. Lucia.
So you're in St. Lucia. All right, so 5 in the morning. Okay, good for getting up so early then.
So I am a Monroe College, Monroe University student, and I'm totally blind. I got blind at a very young age, so blindness has been something that I've gotten used to, and
okay. So can you ask your question or make your point? And it's a little indistinct, so if you can speak slowly, we will get it.
No problem. So point that I'm trying to get across is that I'm attending the Monroe University, and I'm totally blind. One thing that I've observed going through my university life, we just got the recognition to convert to university because we were college before. And I'm studying human services with a minor in psychology. I begin my internship next week Friday, actually, at the Center, the Girls Training Center. And I'm really looking forward to doing this. But one thing that I've observed is young persons, especially people around my age, because I'm 19, when they go out there with a disability, they don't tend to advocate much for themselves. So for example, I'm at the university, and one of the main issues that I've been hearing is that students register, they get accepted, but the school is not aware that the students actually have a disability, which is something that really affects, that could affect the students' grades. And of course, personally, I believe that this is one of the ways that we allow persons to look down on us, because we actually have, we're capable, but given the fact that we know, we could be discriminated.
Yeah.
We tend to hide stuff like our disability, and I believe that we should have more, maybe webinars or a bit more information to educate our youth, like our young persons, especially those within the education sector, in order to help them become comfortable being themselves, and to avoid less discrimination.
Okay. I'm going to stop you there because we're running out of time, but very good points. This is the University of the West Indies, is it?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Is it part of the University of the West Indies?
Well, I'm not part of the university. I'm Modern University, which is a school that is based in New York.
You're a university.
But they have a branch right here.
All right. A university in New York is covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's very, very clear that they have to make reasonable accommodations. They have to create education in the least restrictive environment, and that is the responsibility of the university. If there is,
they actually do. They actually do have the accommodations. It's not that the students do not want to inform the school.
Oh, well, all right.
About the disability.
So then what is needed is an awareness raising campaign, maybe with the students' union. There should be also an officer whose job it is to meet the adjustments that are needed. And I think it's really about getting people to understand that it is in their best interest to identify as a disabled student so that they can get the adjustments that are needed. And they are not going to make progress in life and employment and elsewhere unless they do ask for what they're entitled to. So this is about awareness raising, and it's about developing a whole series of a program to actually get that going. So, but there are lots of examples of that around the world where it's been very successful. Perhaps the most successful, which you can see online, is the Open University in the UK, which has 50,000 disabled students. It's an online study program, but have a look at their access areas on their website and you'll see the sorts of things that are available. And I think this awareness raising and saying, look, as a disabled student, it is in your interest to identify to us. It can still be confidential, but you should still identify so that you can get the adjustments that you need. I'm going to go to Ambassador Nyasa. We haven't very much time left, so short contribution. Thank you, Christy.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard, and everyone who managed to attend this this program. I don't want to say much because everything has been said by our presenters, those who contributed. I just want to say this very important program that we are doing, we should make sure that we find ways to ensure that the information cascades down to the grassroots so that everyone gets this information. It's not everyone who has access to internet. For example, in most African countries, remember we are among the poorest countries where a person in a rural area cannot have access to internet. But this information that we are getting is very important, and it helps citizens and policymakers to make informed decisions. So I just want to encourage every one of us through you, Richard, to try and come up with mechanisms to ensure that the coordinators in each country who are able to attend these programs can help us to spread the message through having workshops in rural areas, in more remote areas, so that no one is left behind. Remember, access to information is very important in life, as it helps policymakers and implementers to make informed decisions. I'm also a journalist by profession, so I really understand those things. That's why I'm saying let's come up with ways to ensure that this information cascades down to the person who is in a rural area who doesn't have access to internet. Also, those people, they also really need a voice, their voices to be heard in platforms like these ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naisha. And of course, your role as Ambassador for Disability across the African Union is for all African countries. And it seems to me that we, as the Commonwealth, which is only 17 countries in Africa, will be happy to collaborate with you to sharing what we are developing so that you can use it across all of Africa. Because Article 8, which I think all African countries have actually signed up to the convention, and many have signed the African Protocol. What's needed is for you to actually generate some funding at an international level for this awareness program on Article 8, and that should be on local radio, in my view, which is the way we can reach most people, backed up by things in local community languages. But then literacy is still a big issue, and particularly many disabled people in rural areas have never gone to school, and therefore they're not going to access it except in an oral way. So we need to really identify this. And I think you should get together a brief of why we do this. We can work with you, but it should be Africa as a whole intervention, because that is where we have the largest problem of getting people to know their rights. But thank you for raising that, and we will work with you on it. I've got time for one last person. Is that Ugea? Tony, do you want to speak? You're up on the screen, or not? If not, I will. I think that you are our last question. So sorry about, I'm going to wind up now. So sorry, everybody, about the technical difficulties. You do have a question, right? So quickly come in because we're running out of time. If you can unmute yourself and ask your question, sir. Uega Tonyunga.
We're up to time, Rich. Really.
I know. All right. I'm sorry about that. If you, I'm going to put my email address in the chat here, just so anybody, any further questions, I'm happy to field and send you answers. But I'd like to thank everybody for participating in this rather difficult seminar. We had power outages, we had all sorts of things, but I think we've had some good discussion and some good points have been made. This is just the beginning of our collaboration of the parent company, if you like, or the organisation that supports the Youth Forum is the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, and we will continue to support them in holding a whole series of seminars. You saw in one of Kihembo's slides there is a leaflet, which I hope he will send out to everybody who's got involved with this, because not everybody is yet a member. You can't be a member of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, but you can be a member of the Youth Forum. So I would urge people who meet the criteria I talked about to join, and whether you're able to do that or not, to carry on and stay with us as the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum. People who said the problem is at the grassroots are absolutely right. There's no point signing conventions and other things and talking about them in government committees unless real change happens for disabled people where they live in their communities. And that's what we are about. We are fighting for full implementation of all the rights in the UNCRPD and for full equity for disabled people across the Commonwealth. So thank you all for participating. I think we have to end here. Thanks to the captioner and the sign interpreter, and thanks for your patience in putting up with us in this rather difficult seminar. But I think we've had enough good points for people to take things away and get on with it. But as I say, do email me. My email's up there, but there isn't a dot in it, so it's wrong. So I'll put it up again. Rieser, RIESER, @gmail.com for any further points that people want to make. Okay, thank you very much, and good evening or good afternoon or good morning to all of you. Bye-bye.